of FICCI Cascade, where we share insights and have a candid, spontaneous dialogue to understand the various facets of illicit trade and economy with our esteemed guests. As part of the series, some of the most amazing minds, including economists, policymakers, thought leaders, heads of parliamentary forces, paramilitary forces, and others have joined us for a conversation on a wide array of topics pertaining to this subject. We are delighted to have with us today Mr. Vivek Johri, Chairman, Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. Mr. Johri is an officer of 1985 batch of Indian Revenue Service and has an illustrious career spanning over more than 35 years. I have had the privilege to know Mr. Johri for several years now. During his numerous interactions with me in his various roles, encompassing the entire gamut of indirect tax administration, especially in the policy formulation, including member, tax policy, CBIC, and Chief Commissioner Customs as Navasheva, his deep insights on matters and an in-depth understanding of issues have always been a source of inspiration and really impressed me. His tenure as member GST saw many important changes carried out in GST law and procedures for easing the compliance burden on taxpayers and tightening enforcement for tackling tax evasion, both extremely critical for improving efficiency and responsiveness of tax revenues for our economic growth. He has played a pivotal role in laying policy foundation for rollout of GST and was instrumental in drafting the Constitution 115th Amendment Bill 2010, which laid the foundation of GST in India. I can actually share from my personal experience when the discussion about GST was going on, where he met several industry people and interacted with them to understand as to how we have to structure the entire GST framework, which will be not only easy, implementable, and serve the purpose of our country. India is a very complex country. It is not easy to design a structure which we can have where all the stakeholders can be satisfied by the policymakers. And I must say that Mr. Johri's deep insight on this matter, understanding of this subject, has laid such a solid foundation for the GST structure in this country. And we are all seeing the benefit of the work that has been done by him and his team. I really want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule and joining us today. I also welcome Mr. P.C. Jha, former chairman, CBIC, an officer of 1971 batch of Indian Customs and Central Excise Service. He has a stellar background and has served in the IRS for about 38 years. He is also an extremely valued advisor to FICCI Cascade. Thank you for joining us today, Mr. Jha. Ladies and gentlemen, as the nation celebrates 75 years of glorious independence this year, it aims to create a new and prosperous India. It is evident that conducive policies and a stable tax regime are at the forefront of this much anticipated progress, which will undoubtedly pave the way for growth and development of India's Amrit Kal. Several studies have indicated that high rates of taxation impact tax buoyancy, make the system complex, add to the cost of compliance, and results in tax arbitrage. The Lafarge curve, which shows the relationship between tax rates and the amount of tax revenue collected by the government, also points to the fact that an optimal tax rate maximizes total government revenue,
I'm
which
able to hear.
we are all aware
I'm able
is
to hear.
much needed for meeting the objectives for growth and welfare of our nation. It is indeed heartening to see that Government of India has demonstrated stability as a cornerstone of our taxation regime. With a balanced tax policy, improvement in compliance, and strict action against tax evaders in place, full credit goes to CBIC, which under the leadership of Mr. Vivek Johri is seeing record-breaking monthly earnings from goods and services tax, which stood at an excess of 1.67 lakh crore in the April this year, which is 20% higher than the corresponding month last year. This is a laudable achievement. The department is also seeing a healthy upward trend in the number of percentages of returns filed, as well as in the number of e-way bills generated. This goes on to show that various measures have been taken to strengthen the tax administration and initiating appropriate action against tax evaders to ensure greater compliance, leading to record collection of revenues. My heartiest congratulations to Mr. Johri. May I, give a really big clap for this? A great job done. Uh, and equally addressing the issues of anti-evasion, smuggling, and cross-border illicit trade with an iron hand. The department's achievement in apprehending the antisocial elements who indulge in such criminal activities is indeed a great service to the nation against the menace of illicit trade. I'm happy to share that to generate awareness and curb problems of growing illicit trade in smuggled and counterfeit goods, FICCI Cascade, known as this particular subsector of FICCI, has been working extensively with government, law enforcement bodies, industry, and consumers at large. FICCI Cascade, in pursuance of its agenda, has been organizing series of multi-stakeholder dialogue to tackle this adversary and spread awareness about the socio-economic impact of illicit trade. Today's interaction is another such step. I once again welcome Mr. Johri and look forward to an enriching session. May I request Mr. Jha to take over the session from here. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I am happy that finally the problem regarding the video has been solved. And so I will start. Yeah, respected Mr. Vivek Johri, Chairman CBIC, Mr. Anil Rajput, Chairman Cascade, ladies and gentlemen. Today's In Conversation program with Mr. Vivek Johri as our special guest is a significant event for the Cascade. I thank Mr. Johri for accepting our request and sparing his valuable time for this session. Mr. Johri is a distinguished officer of the Indian Revenue Service, not only because he is heading the Indirect Taxes Administration, but also because he possesses many such personal qualities which are not very common. I have known Vivek always as an officer who maintains very high level of probity and integrity in public service. He is exceptionally hardworking and has in-depth knowledge of tariff and taxation policy matters, a subject which most of the people is quite a complex thing. He uses this knowledge to simplify the taxation system with a view to make it taxpayers friendly. Among various responsibilities of the CBIC, revenue collection remains on the top priority. Chanakya had advised his king that since all undertakings of the state depend on finance, foremost attention must be paid to treasury. In performance of this important aspect of work, the CBIC under the able leadership of Mr. Johri has been doing remarkably well, as is evident by the record collection of GST in the month of April this year. Now, a few words about the Cascade. Ever since its creation in 2011 as a dedicated forum under FICCI, Cascade has been pursuing a relentless campaign to combat the menace of illicit trade in counterfeits, pass-offs, and smuggled goods. Cascade constantly strives to get support from industry leaders, legal experts, consumer organizations, enforcement agencies, and policy makers in the government so that all concerned can make concerted efforts to deal with this serious situation. Cascade, in fact, is a small team of the people. There is a core group only of 6 people, which is supported by a think tank team in which there are distinguished people from the judiciary, from the executive, and from other fields. So the team is small, but we have the satisfaction that with this small resource, this team Cascade has done much better than any other organizations in the country. To deal with the problem of illicit business of US dollar 2.2 trillion, and it constitutes 3% of the global GDP. The main adverse effect of illicit trades include that the goods in illicit market remain Hello. Oh,
So we can hear you.
yeah. Okay, I think there was some problem. The main adverse effects of the illicit include that the goods in illicit market remain unaccounted and untaxed throughout the supply chain, and so it results in substantial loss of government revenue. The consumers and like the food items and the medicines are dangerous to health. Illicit trade also results in unfair competition for the legitimate business activity. This discourages investment in business. This also results in employment loss, and we have also found that the illegal profits generated are used to finance global terrorism. Our knowledge of the subject reveals that magnitude of illicit market is large, and that with passage of time, instead of diminishing, it is actually proliferating, and that too at an accelerated pace. A study got conducted by Cascade in the past has indicated that 1 out of 3 FMCG household and personal goods available in the market is not genuine. Similarly, 1 out of 4 FMCG packaged food items, 1 out of 5 tobacco products, including cigarettes, and 1 out of 12 mobile phones enter into the market through unknown sources. Cascade's study had also indicated that in the financial year 2013-14, due to illicit trade in respect of just 7 items, total loss of government revenue was about 39,000 crore, and the sales loss to the genuine industry was of the tune of 1,05,000 crores. In the backdrop of this grave situation, we would like to avail this opportunity to benefit from your expert views very broadly about a smuggling scenario in India, enforcement of laws relating to indirect taxes, steps being taken to contain tax evasion, and um, various initiatives being taken by the CBIC to combat this menace. Now, since the most important aspect is the revenue, so the first point I would like to make is pertaining to revenue. We have noticed that in April 2020, the revenue collection has reached the rock bottom. And from there, in 2 years, it has been making upward, northward journey. And now, as we have seen in the April 2022, this is at such a high level. So I would like to request you that how do you trace the trajectory of the economic growth and also the rise in the revenue collection during these last 2 years when the COVID had the lockdown for the COVID was there in April 2020 to now there has been a buoyancy, and we would like to know how it has happened. Mr. Johri.
Yeah. Thank you very much to FICCI Cascade for inviting me here today. Shri P.C. Jha, Shri Anil Rajput, and other distinguished members of Cascade and members in the audience. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to share with you my thoughts on how we're combating illicit trade, both domestically and internationally, dealing with tax evasion, and what we've done to shore up revenues and to get where we are today with regard to revenues. Now, to come to your question, sir, it is a fact that the economy has bounced back since 2021-22, and compared to the previous year, which of course experienced a shrinkage owing to COVID-19. And the nominal rate of growth, as per the latest estimates in 21-22, is about 19.4% in GDP. Now, ignoring quarterly movements, there were quarters where the rate of growth was very high, but the range varies from 6% in Q3 and Q4 to about 20% in Q1. But that's largely because of the base effect, in Q1 of 2021, you recall, and you also mentioned, sir, that there was a very sharp drop in revenues. Now, the good news is that GST collections have been consistently higher than the GDP growth rate for each quarter. And gross collections, ignoring Q1, where the base effect was very strong owing to COVID, and we had a revenue growth rate of almost 80%. In Q2 to Q4, the rates of growth ranged from about 17% to 28% compared to the same period of the previous year. The other way of looking at it is to look at the monthly collections and how they behaved in the 2 years. So in 2021, monthly collections exceeded 1 lakh crore. And you would recall, sir, that at the beginning, when GST was launched, there used to be a concern about whether the monthly collection would even cross 1 lakh crore. But in 2021, we saw that in 6 months out of 12, the monthly collections exceeded 1 lakh crore. But come to 21-22, your monthly collections exceeded 1.25 lakh crore in 7 months of the year. The average monthly collections also went up from less than 1 lakh in 2021 to 1.24 lakhs in 21-22. And we all know that the total collections from GST were about state and center taken together about 15 lakh crore, 14.88 lakh crore to be precise. Now, factors that contributed to this, you asked me that question. To some extent, of course, it is the bounce back in the economy and the inflation and the oil and commodity prices that we've been experiencing in 21-22. Um, but there have been, two levels at which we've made very significant changes, and we've, strategized quite, in a very focused way for increasing our revenue efficiency and revenue buoyancy. Now, the first, of course, we all know that, 2 or 3 ways in which you can deal with revenue is to bring about policy changes, to reform the rate structure so that you remove inversions, you do away with distortions, you allow credit to flow easily within the system, and, you rationalize the rates of tax. Now, you would recall that during the year 21-22, particularly at the 45th GST Council meeting, there were many such issues which were addressed by the Council at the policy level. So we saw the removal of inversions in some of the major sectors like textiles, footwear, renewables, many service sectors, and so on. So that was a policy response, which also contributed to improvement in revenue collections. But the two other ways in which we dealt with, the revenue scenario, one was through legal changes, and the other was through administrative changes. And under both these pillars, we were very conscious that we had to strike the right balance between facilitating the trade so that compliance becomes easier, and we also had to tighten the law where it was required to go after, specific instances of non-compliance. Now, if I talk about legal changes, then some of the important things we did by way of trade facilitation were, one, that we came out with an amnesty scheme. Now, in the years 2021 and 21-22, there was, a drop in the percentage of tax returns filed for GST. This was mainly on account of COVID. And there were many taxpayers who were reporting to us that they were not able to file tax returns for the past period, because if you recall in GST, the filing of returns has to be sequential. And if you haven't filed return for the previous month, you cannot file it this month. So many taxpayers, because of COVID, were not able to file their returns. And they found that the late payment fee, a late filing fee that they had to pay was in fact more than, their tax liability for the period. So this was a problem we had to address. We came out with an amnesty scheme for non-filers and stop filers. We rationalized the late filing fee structure itself. And along with that, we also work quite actively to make the tax filing experience better. Now, this was actually an administrative measure which was meant to improve compliance. And how did we do that? So the GST Council decided that we needed to reform the return structure, and we needed to auto-populate returns based on electronic invoices. You would recall, sir, that in October 2020, we introduced electronic invoices for taxpayers for B2B supplies. And these were initially introduced for taxpayers having a turnover exceeding 500 crores. But the plan was to gradually universalize this. And now we've come to a stage where any taxpayer having a turnover above 20 crore per annum is required to generate all invoices electronically, whether he's a service provider or he's a supplier of goods. Now, the advantage we've been able to reap because of this is that the e-invoice becomes the basis for constructing a taxpayer's returns. And it enables us to construct the outward supply return of a supplier, and on that basis to construct the inward supply return of a recipient, and then on that basis to work out the credit available to the taxpayer and indicate to him how much tax he's required to pay in cash. So this auto population of returns and the interconnectivity of returns has really improved the tax filing experience for taxpayers. And earlier, if you recall, there was this refrain that compliance under GST was very difficult. It was, time-taking. It cost everyone money because, they had to engage tax consultants to file their returns. With e-invoicing, and the linkage of returns, it becomes so much simpler. And that is one of the things we did by way of trade facilitation. We also tried to segment taxpayers among those that are high risk and low risk, and small and large. So we brought in a quarterly return and monthly payment scheme for small taxpayers. The idea being that they were absolved of the responsibility of having to file returns every month. They could file quarterly returns, and that brought down significantly the compliance burden of filing, 12 returns or 36 returns per year. That came down very substantially for a very large percentage of the taxpayer population. Then, through law, we also tried to tighten the enforcement provisions. And for example, we recognize that the GSTR1 was the admitted liability of a supplier. We went in for Aadhaar authentication because we found that there was a lot of misuse of ITC. There were fake dealers, there was fake credit in the system, which was obviously impacting our revenue collections and generating other malpractices. In his introductory remarks, Mr. Jha spoke about how the money that is generated through these means is used for unlawful activities, and therefore we were very cognizant of the fact that we needed a clean taxpayer base. We achieved that objective first by introducing Aadhaar authentication for new entrants, so that we were sure that these were entrants who physically existed. We carried out their physical verification. We culled out taxpayers on the basis of data triangulation with income tax, with DGFT. We identified risky taxpayers. We observed their behavioral pattern in filing returns and complying with GST law. And those we found to be high-risk taxpayers, we culled them out of the system by suspending their registrations. We introduced the system of sequential filing of returns so that we were able to curb, misuse of ITC by people who were just entering the system for a short while, generating a whole lot of invoices, passing on credit to their recipients, not paying the tax to government, and then leaving the system. So the one way to deal with it was to ensure that the time limit that was available to such taxpayers was very, very limited. And we achieved that by saying that, a person is prohibited from filing his GSTR 1 for a subsequent month if he hasn't filed the GSTR 3B, which is his liability return, and through which he pays the tax for the previous month. So at best, these wrongdoers, these people who were just trying to game the system by entering it for a short while with the objective of just generating invoices, the time available to them has been shortened very drastically. And we've seen the result of that in improvement in compliance. We launched a very, very concerted strategy along with the states. And this is another good thing which I want to share with our audience today. I think on what GST has achieved over the last 4 years, now almost 5, is that there's a very strong realization that the states and the center have to work together in a collaborative fashion to deal with abuse of the tax system, with tax evasion and non-compliance. And we've been devising strategy with the state governments jointly. We've had several meetings with them. We've institutionalized those meetings at the highest level in the state administration of GST. And, we work out a common strategy for going after wrongdoers. We share data quite robustly amongst us. And we're also doing a lot of capacity building work, for each other. So the states are helping us build capacity in certain areas, and we are reciprocating that in certain other areas. And finally, I must say that the administrative effort of dealing with non-compliance has been very, very visible over the last couple of years. And particularly in 21-22, we administratively nudged a very large section of taxpayers who had either stopped filing or who were not filing their returns to file their returns on time. And the results are there for all of us to see. So Mr. Rajput mentioned this in his opening remarks. Just to share with the audience today, the GSTR 3B filing, and 3B, mind you, is the return through which the tax is paid. It's the liability return of a taxpayer. The percentage of GSTR 3B filing within the month has gone up from 73% in January 21 to 87% in February 22. Likewise, the GSTR 1 filing, and GSTR 1 is the outward supply return of a taxpayer, that has improved from 66% in January 21 to 85% in February 22. So there's a very sharp improvement in the return filing behavior of taxpayers. But we haven't given up. We aren't taking this to be the final sort of resting point. We continue to encourage, do outreach programs with taxpayers to get them to file returns in time and to pay their taxes on time. You've already spoken, Mr. Rajput, about the improvement in e-waybill data, the universality of e-invoices. These are all measures which are helping the tax system to improve compliance and deliver better results in terms of revenue augmentation. I also want to share with you that, the entire exercise, because this is a concern which is often raised by the trade, the entire exercise of revenue augmentation and, dealing with tax evasion and GST over the last 2 years has been driven by data analytics and data triangulation. It is not left to the discretion of individual officers to pick up cases for scrutiny, for audit, for any other means of compliance verification. Even enforcement very often is led by data analytics, data triangulation. Thanks to technology, we have very sophisticated tools for analytics. We have network analysis tools through which we can construct an entire supply chain of a taxpayer. We can figure out their compliance behavior and what their profile is in terms of risk, and we're able to take suitable action to deal with it. I must also at the end share with you, sir, the results of our fake dealer and fake ITC drive, which we commenced in November 2020, along with the states. So far, we've booked 6,700 cases. We have unearthed about more than 20,000 fake GSTINs, and we have detected fake ITC of about 50,000 crores. We have recovered about 2,400 crores through this drive, and of course, attempts are on to improve our recovery. And we've arrested about 650 persons who were involved in these cases. So I think I'll stop here, but that is our story on how we've worked in a very concerted way with the state governments under the guidance of the GST Council to improve compliance and improve revenue buoyancy from GST. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johri. You have really explained in detail, and we have certainly benefited. I am impressed by so many steps taken by the CBIC during the last few years to streamline the system of the tax collection. But as we know, I think I must pay compliments to you, particularly for this thing, that this close collaboration, which has happened now between the tax administration of the central government and the state government, is something which has never happened in the past. Our interaction with the state government machinery was only peripheral. So now this is a remarkable achievement besides so many other things. Now I think I will straight away come to our main point on which we would like to know your views, and you would like to benefit from the expertise which you have in this field. That as we have seen, that one of the reasons for tax evasion is also high rates of taxation on certain items. Because as it happens that when the tax rate is high, then the profit in evasion also becomes very high, and it poses a problem to the enforcement agency of the department to deal with this system. So when you take a decision to fix the tax rates on particular commodity, of course, one important consideration is the revenue requirement of the government. But at the same time, whether this point is taken into account, that is the paying capacity of the people, and this fact particularly that if the tax rate is high, then the profit margin in evasion would be high. And although the efficiency of the enforcement department, as we know, under the CBIC, the efficiency of the field formations is very high, which we have seen from the detection of the cases. But this point is still there, that when the tax rate is very high, the profit margin in evasion is high. And that is one of the major reasons for the proliferation in the illicit trade. So how do you fix the tax rates? What are the considerations? And we will certainly like to know from you in little detail, because not many people are experts in this field. I know you are a pandit of this subject. So please, Mr. Johri.
Thank you, sir, for very generous, your generous remarks. No, I do agree that as a theoretical construct, what Mr. Rajput also spoke about, the Laffer curve, is talked about in economic theory. But I must also share with the audience that there is no, as far as I know, there is no empirical evidence to establish the Laffer curve and its validity in all situations for all commodities, for direct versus indirect taxes. I don't think much work has been done on that. But intuitively, we all know that a high rate of tax creates an arbitrage opportunity, and therefore the temptation to evade the tax automatically goes up. As a policymaker, sir, the tricky question is, what is a tipping point where this trade-off between revenue, yield, and avoidance or evasion, starts taking place? Now, unfortunately, there is no objective or scientific way of determining that, and so it has to be an iterative process. We learn as we go along. So, we fix a rate of tax based on many considerations, such as what has been the growth of that sector, what is the expected sort of size, new investments, if any, that are coming in, how much, and the ability to pay principal, what kind of goods or services we are talking about, which is the segment of the population, the socio-economic segment of the population that is going to consume those goods, what will be the tax burden on them, and so on and so forth. But as I said, there is no rigorous, conclusive way of determining what is that optimal tipping point. I must also share with you, in the context of gold, that we've done some deep study and analysis within CBIC. And to our surprise, we found that there wasn't really a direct correlation between the rate of tax and the level of smuggling. And there were instances where, even though the rate of tax had fallen, the smuggling of gold had gone up. And of course, we measure smuggling in terms of how much we're actually able to catch, seize, and how many cases we're able to book. But and so we looked at the secular trend, and we found that the relationship does not always hold. The other counterintuitive thing, which we very often lose sight of, is that there have been, and there still are, many instances of evasion of tax, avoidance of tax, even in sectors where the rate of tax is low. There are many services, for example, which attract a GST of 5%. But that is not to say that we have not come across evasion in these sectors. And some of them are prone to very high evasion. So as I said, this is something that varies from sector to sector. there is no one single formula that can sort of define, what is the appropriate rate and level of taxation which will strike that balance. Also, sir, I mean, based on our past experience, I can tell you that some of the goods which are perceived to be inelastic in terms of their demand, they're perceived to be sin goods, have have experienced spells where there's been no increase in tax rates. And that's a very conscious effort. So, we reached a certain level of taxation, and we felt that, it wasn't a good idea to increase the tax levels further until, the revenue yield from that particular commodity had stabilized, and, it gave us an organic rate of growth. So these are, a couple of stray thoughts I have about how we fix tax rates and achieve that balance.
Thank you, Mr. Johri. Now we come to the point of non-compliance and the resultant tax evasion. I mean, as we have seen that the revenue collection in the past has really been very good. Also, the efficient enforcement agencies under the CBIC, I may make particular mention of DRI, DGI, also other field formations. They have really been doing remarkably well, and their efficiency has not been adversely affected even by the COVID. During the COVID time also, there were very good seizures. But the thing is that still, I mean, as we have given the statistics, that the size of the illicit market is large. So the problem of non-compliance and tax evasion remains. So we would like to know that what are the additional steps which you plan for the future so that the tax enforcement system of the department, we know that it will can never be 100% foolproof, but how the level of efficiency can be raised further? What are the additional steps which you plan for future?
So, sir, let me begin with customs, and the kind of non-compliance issues we face in customs are slightly different from what we face in the other two taxes, namely GST and excise. So, in customs, as you already know, and I think nobody knows it better than FICCI Cascade, that the range and the swathe of sort of infractions, violations that we have to deal with is very wide. So you're talking about, commercial fraud, undervaluation, misclassification. That is one set of sort of violations and tax evasion methods that we have to deal with, and go all the way to outright smuggling. And therefore, our strategy has to be suitably calibrated to meet each one of these challenges quite effectively. And the modus operandi also varies. So we've had concealment of gold, concealment of narcotics in cargo. Every other day, you would have seen in the newspapers, we interdict passengers who are carrying gold, who are carrying narcotics, on their bodies and their clothes, and all kinds of unique methods of concealment. We've had cases of concealment of consumer goods, mobile phones, parts, cosmetics in containerized cargo. That's also something that we've come across quite frequently. On the commercial sort of intelligence side, and as far as customs cargo clearance is concerned, there are three major challenges that we looked at, and we still continue to face. We've addressed them partially, but I would like to share with the House, what these were. So we looked at the sources of revenue leakage in customs, in clearance of cargo, because all of us know that it's cargo that yields a large part of the customs revenue and not so much passengers. So the three major areas of misuse that we found were misuse of free trade agreements, misuse of export promotion schemes, and misuse of end-use based exemptions. And the approach of the government has been to deal with them in a systemic sort of fashion. So let me begin with misuse of FTAs. There were many cases that we had booked, both for primary produce and for manufactured goods, where we found that the country of origin was being misdeclared, from the point of view of availing of an FTA. So if you recall, we brought in, the Carotar provisions in our law in 2019, and we operationalized them in 2020. We picked up a few select commodities, for detailed verification of origin at the point of import. And these commodities were picked up based on, the trade trends that we'd witnessed, over the last couple of years in respect of these commodities. We've done detailed verifications of country of origin certificates. In some cases, they were found to be, not genuine, but those are specific cases, and those, of course, we're dealing with, under the law. But we also found that there was declaration or misuse of the rules of origin, in as much as the value addition norms were not being actually fulfilled by goods that profess to belong to or originate from a particular country. So, for example, if there was a value addition norm of 35% for goods to be conferred origin, if they were coming in under a certain FTA, we found that when we did a detailed cost analysis for certain suppliers abroad, we found that, their profits were inflated, their transportation costs were being inflated, just so that they were able to achieve the value addition of 35%. Now, so this is one area, and we've dealt with it through Carotar. We continue, to deal with them and to book cases under Carotar. So that is one area of misuse. The other area was the misuse of export promotion schemes, particularly those based on scripts. And the transfer of these scripts, their misutilization, bogus scripts floating in the market, these were all the kind of misuses that we were noticing. They were obviously impacting our revenue collections. So we've addressed this in a very holistic and systemic manner in collaboration with the Department of Commerce. You're aware that these scripts are now all electronic. They're generated electronically. There's a cash ledger that every exporter, there's a credit ledger that every exporter maintains on the system. Every time he exports cargo, he's given a credit in his ledger. He has the ability to generate a script electronically, and the script gets debited on the system also electronically. So there's complete transparency on how these scripts are generated, used for payment of taxes. And I think that itself have a very significant impact on misuse. And the last one, of course, is end-use based exemptions, where we not only did a thorough review of all end-use based exemptions, we have completely automated what are known as import of goods at concessional rate of duty rules. And these are applied to all end-use based exemptions, where anyone importing goods subject to an end-use condition can submit his request for imports or his projection of what he's going to import. He can file returns electronically. He doesn't have to file it for each and every import that he makes. And yet we have complete visibility in the system about who imported the goods, where they were transferred, who utilized those goods, and we're able to verify that electronically. So these are three areas on commercial, cargo that we have reformed quite holistically. The larger point I want to make, both for cargo and for smuggling, is that we have resorted to better targeting and sharper targeting through data analytics. We use artificial intelligence, we use machine learning. It's been very successful of late in targeting specific instances of misuse. A large number of narcotics cases and big seizures that you've seen in the recent past have very often emanated from our analytics framework. And the advantage of advanced filing of bills of entry on the import side is that we have the data well in advance. We're able to run our risk engine. We're able to profile cargo and taxpayers, and we're able to target very sharply, cases of suspect imports. And of course, we've ramped up the use of technology. We are using video scopes now to examine cargo. We are looking at how we can improve the examination skills in the system. We are trying to do more of capacity building in that area. Uh, and I'll talk about more specific measures, like scanning, using the canine squad to detect, fake currency, gold, narcotics.
Yeah, that is impressive. And yeah, particularly the use of the data analytics which the department is have been making now during the last few years. This was certainly not there at this scale in the past. So there are several strong points which the department has got. As we know that the intelligence network of the department works very well. The risk management system, then for the valuation which we use NIDB, all these things are among the best in the world. But still, it is felt that perhaps on the technology front, I really don't know that whether we are as good as the advanced, some other advanced country. Like we came to know in the past that at Rotterdam seaport, the containers can be scanned even when the rake on the rails are on the move. And on the other side, of course, it is a thing of the past, but if I can share from my experience, that when the first scanner was to be installed at the Navasheva port, from the time when the proposal was put up in the file in the board office in 2000, and since I was in the board office at that time, so I remember the proposal was put up in the file in 2000, and the first container was scanned at the Navasheba port in 2005. So it has taken 5 years. I hope the situation has improved further. So far as the technologies are concerned, on that we will like to know from you that how do we compare as compared to the advanced countries, and what are the plans of the department for the future, and whether the pace to acquire these technological tools have become faster now.
Thank you, sir. So just to give an update on scanners, we have 22 scanners already in place at 16 locations. Within this year, we are already in the process of setting up a rail scanner at Navasheva and other major gateway ports. The proposals are in the offing. The idea is that all containers, and I mean all, containers that move into the hinterland from a gateway port are scanned 100%, because this movement normally happens by rail, and that gives us a good opportunity to scan all of them while they're in movement out of the gateway port. By the time the cargo reaches the ICD, where it is to be discharged and clearance procedure has to happen, the local customs officials there already have the scanned images of containers. The suspicious containers have been identified. They know which ones to interdict and which ones to examine in greater detail. What we've also been able to achieve, sir, is that we've been able to link the scanned images. You recall that these scanners were standalone in a sense, and there was a problem of transmitting these images to the officers that actually carry out the examination in the docks, to support them when they're doing the examination. Now, we have achieved that ability 100%. The systems have been completely integrated. So any container that is picked up for scanning, the scanned image of that container is available to the officer who's to examine the cargo, and he's told exactly which quadrant could be suspicious, and so he knows exactly which area of the container to look for if he has to look for concealment or any other form of misuse. So scanning is definitely a very, very effective, non-intrusive way of dealing with non-compliance. And our attempt is to scan as much, of the cargo. And of course, we can do it only for containerized cargo, but to scan as a higher and higher percentage of containerized cargo. The second technology, sir, that I talked about earlier is data analytics. And we have a national cargo targeting center, which has two wings, one that deals with passengers, the other that deals with cargo. And they have very advanced analytics tools. And as I said, we are able to pinpoint with great precision, cases of, concealment, particularly, or cases where there could be narcotics, there could be gold. And, we mitigate the risk in several ways. So these could be cases where we ask for the containers to be examined 100%. These could be cases where we ask for scanning to happen 100%. And then, we take it from there. So our data analytics ability has really improved over the last couple of years, not just in terms of the tools that we have acquired, but also in terms of the skill sets that we've developed within the department to deal with this. And I think I take pride in the fact that we may be better off than some of the so-called developed countries when it comes to data analytics and targeting. So that's another point I wanted to make. The third thing the third technology which we are very actively experimenting with, and we've done some pilots, is blockchain. And we're using blockchain to monitor the movement of cargo from the port to the warehouse and from one warehouse to another. A pilot has already been done, and we're trying to now universalize that technology so that there is better monitoring of what goes into a warehouse and what comes out of it, because there's a fair amount of misuse even with that. In the future, sir, we need to, and we are planning to deploy this technology for other cargo movement, which currently moves under bond. So, for example, movement into an SEZ, movement into a free trade warehousing zone, and so on and so forth, and out of it into the DTA. All this can now be tracked. The third thing which we've done is to extensively use RFID tagging of containers, both on the import side and on the export side. There's a logistics data bank that I'm sure you're aware of, which is run by the Department of Commerce, where containers are affixed with an RFID tag the moment they come into the country. Their movement across toll plazas is monitored through those RFID tags, and we're able to track end to end the movement of cargo, where it has gone. Has it gone to the intended beneficiary? Has it gone to somebody else? Could there be a case of diversion? This, coupled with e-waybill information that we have, is again a very powerful tool of dealing with diversion, non-compliance, and clandestine trade, illicit trade. Likewise, on the export side, we have used RFID tagging because we found that very often export containers are used for outward smuggling. Red Sanders, for example, we've had cases, so I'm sure you're aware, where Red Sanders was concealed in export cargo, and it was there was an attempt to smuggle it out of the country. With RFID tagging of containers, we are able to track end-to-end the movement of export cargo also. So these are the couple of technologies that I thought I'll mention. And technology is changing all the time, and therefore we're trying to keep pace with it, as quickly and as rapidly as we can. The last thing I want to share with you, sir, we recently did a completely novel experiment within the CBIC. We organized a hackathon for our own officers, where we asked them to come up with solutions, IT-based solutions, data-driven solutions using analytics and other tools, to problems that they face in their day-to-day working. And many of the problems that were investigated by these groups, had to deal with illicit trade, smuggling, and so on and so forth. So I think in terms of technology, we are in a good place.
Yeah, there is no doubt that the department has done remarkably well. You are taking so many steps which are so impressive. One point I would like to mention that the media reports often they suggest about the smuggling of a few items which remain the problem items for smuggling, like gold, cigarette, drugs. It may be also because that the seizures made by the DRI, DGI, and the enforcement agencies under CBIC, they have also been very good. Particularly, if I can mention just in a few words about the drugs. I mean, the performance of the enforcement agency, particularly of the DRI, has been so good. I mean, in the past, the seizure of 3 tons of heroin at Mundra port, plus some other seizure, and the latest in the chain being the seizure of 62 kg of heroin just yesterday from the air cargo complex. Similarly, we find from time to time the seizure of the cigarettes, and the cigarettes being seized in containers, maybe 5 containers of cigarettes at one time, 10 containers of cigarettes at one time, which is a huge quantity. And as we have seen that one out of 5 cigarettes available in the market is fake. So whether in respect of these particular items, is there any particular awareness and attention in the department?
So the three that you mentioned, I would add gold, narcotics, and cigarettes are key items, prone to outright smuggling, concealment, and other modus, which the trade uses. And I just want to tell you that as CBIC, we are going very aggressively against all three. And you've seen the results for yourself. I mean, you just mentioned, sir, you talked about narcotics. Let me share with you that in 2021-22, we booked, we were able to seize 92,000 kgs of narcotics, the value being 17,400 crores. So this is not a small amount. This is not a small value. I think it's a record of some sort. And, now the frequency of narcotic seizure by CBIC formations, including DRI, has improved significantly, both at the airports and through cargo. And again, this is to a great extent, the outcome of the expertise we've developed in using analytics to identify these cases. So there are certain origins, there are certain sources, certain suppliers, who we are tracking, whose behavior we are tracking, and we're able to very sharply target these cases. There have been similar success stories in cigarettes, particularly in the Northeast, because that was one area where, through which, there was a lot of smuggling of cigarettes. And I'm sure it continues, but I'm happy to note that, in 21-22, for example, we were able to seize 14 crore cigarette sticks. And this was not just stray consignments, like you mentioned, sir. These were container loads of cigarettes. We had a case recently in Delhi where many containers, which were declared to be, photocopying paper, had just one layer of photocopying paper stacked in front, and the entire container was, full of cigarettes. Smuggled, an attempt to smuggle those cigarettes into the country. And we've seized and we've detected these cases. So we've had good success, but we're not resting on our laurels. And I want to assure the House that, we are going after all three in a very aggressive, concerted way.
Okay, Mr. Johri. Now, just a few points about the collaboration which other people can make, and whether the department would require them. I know that the department itself is very resourceful. I mean, it is the CBIC is an important department of a sovereign government, so it does not lack resources. But even then, the collaboration from other people would help. So the first I would like to know that what type of collaboration from the industry you would like to welcome, so that the voluntary compliance by the taxpayers can improve further.
So the one major way in which the industry can help us, and they have been doing it, and I thank them for it, but it should continue and become a more intensive effort, is in giving us feedback. I think what we need from the industry is honest feedback of how things actually are for them on the ground. This brings this feedback is very valuable to us, in as much as it helps us do a reality check. It helps course correction. It helps us prioritize what we need to do, and even identify areas where our officers need capacity building. You're aware, sir, that the industry has been very actively collaborating with us in dealing with knockoffs and fakes. We've had many training programs which several industry bodies, including FICCI Cascade, have conducted for our officers from time to time. These are very practical kind of trainings. These are more like workshops. They're not really training programs in that sense. But the industry has come forward and explained to the officers at the cutting edge level, those who examine the cargo, those who assess the cargo, in identifying a fake product from a genuine one. There are very smart ways in which the industry creates fakes. Their lookalikes, their labeling is similar. The product names may be similar. In cigarettes, we've seen so many knockoffs. Of well-known brands. Mr. Anil Rajput is aware. So I think the collaborative work that we are expecting is in these two areas. One, in giving us feedback, honest feedback from time to time about where we are going wrong, where we can improve further, and secondly, in guiding and helping sensitizing our officers to the potential areas of misuse and how they can sort of improve their skills in identifying those. So these are the two, sir, that I see as the most important ones.
Yeah, the next point would be about the consumers, that what type of role that the department will like that the consumers can play, so that you can have an effective and efficient compliance regime. Now, on this point, I will like to inform you, and you will be happy to know that invariably in every seminar of the Cascade, one point which we make, one request which we make to the consumers, that when they buy any goods, they must ask for the bills. Because as some study has indicated, that if the consumers buy the goods against bills, then perhaps 80% of the problems would be solved. So this is what the Cascade has been doing. But we'll like to hear from you that what roles, what cooperation, what role would you like the consumers to play in an effective tax administration by CBIC?
So I think you've already said it. The one thing that our message to the consumer also is, and we're all consumers as we are tax officials, as we work for the industry. And I think we all have to be cognizant of the fact that if somebody is trying to cut the corner and evade tax, and we are complicit in doing that by simply either ignoring or you're not insisting that a bill should be raised when you buy things in retail, I think that is something that we must stand up against as consumers. We see it happen ever so often, and it does not necessarily happen in purchases which are large value or large volume. Even in our day-to-day purchases, very often small grocery stores and all, we find that bills are not raised. There's no account we kept of sales and all that. So I think as consumers, the one contribution we can all make, as you rightly said, is to insist on proper invoicing, proper billing, so that sales are accounted for all the time. The second area, sir, which strikes me, um, and it's part of the consumer awareness campaign that the Ministry of Consumer Affairs also launches, is to focus on the billing, on the labeling of products. And very often the labeling, is also a giveaway of, whether the product is genuine. Does it actually deliver what it promises to deliver? We've had cases. Yesterday, somebody reported to me that imported teas were being knocked off as were being sold as Darjeeling tea in the Indian market in locations. Now, these are things which we can only get to hear and we can act upon if we get proper feedback from the consumers. So I think these are the two ways in which I see consumers contributing to our cause.
Yeah, Mr. Johri, with this, we come to our last point on which we will like to seek your views is that would you like to suggest the ways in which a non-government agency like Cascade, which is passionately engaged in a campaign against illicit trade, can cooperate with the CBIC and strengthen its hands in minimizing the scores of tax evasion and illicit trade?
So their role I see as being similar to that of industry and consumers. So once again, we need to work collaboratively in terms of receiving inputs and information from NGOs. Cascade has been doing that. They're alerting us to whatever misuse they see on the ground, reported to them through their commercial intelligence and through businesses and industries that are part of FICCI. And that is very useful for us in strategizing how to deal with those infractions and that kind of misuse. And once again, in generally creating awareness amongst the industry, highlighting the ill effects of tax evasion, and how that money can be used for all kinds of wrong things which are injurious to the economy, to society, whether it's drugs or it's arms, ammunition, whatever else it's used for financing of. So I mean, I guess NGOs have a similar role as industry bodies or trade associations.
Now, in case you have still a few minutes left, I mean, to give, then there is one point where we will like to benefit from your views. Of course, this is not included in the points which we had sent to you in advance. But since we started with the revenue, I would like to end with the revenue. That the past, the situation in the manufacturing sector and the revenue collection has been really very good. But how do you foresee the situation in the coming 1 year, that is the financial year 22-23? Because as we can see now that there are so many headwinds in the economy. There is this ongoing war in Ukraine. There is the rising price of the petroleum crude. There is high level of inflation. There is supply chain disruptions, because of which there may be problem of the raw materials, semi-finished goods and the machinery. And also there is fall in the volume of the global trade. So in this type of situation, how do you visualize the situation to remain in the financial year 2022-23?
So, sir, revenues are going to be under pressure on the custom side because we've taken certain specific policy measures, in some areas to deal with rising commodity prices, for instance. So on the customs side and in excise, because we've dropped the excise duty rates on HSD and petrol, which are the major sort of revenue yielding commodities for excise. I think there will be pressure on us in the coming year. But on GST, I see the revenue yield as stabilizing, close to about 1.3 to 1.35 per month. I generally believe that there is a potential to shore up revenues further. We still haven't done, while we've improved return filing in GST, which itself is a very big step, we haven't looked at the quality of returns that are being filed. We haven't been able to scrutinize, the returns that have been filed to us. We haven't been able to carry out audits to the extent we should. And I think these are two areas where I see, quite a significant potential for improving revenues, improving compliance. So I think we are more hopeful of what we'd be able to achieve in GST. On customs, like you said, there are going to be headwinds, which will add to our challenges. But we are ready to deal with it. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah, with this we come to the end of the session, and I knew that this session will be very good because there are not many officers who have such thorough knowledge of the taxation laws and the procedure, and even after having knowledge, who are so sincere their work. So I expected that this session would be enlightening, and it has really been so. I am thankful to you that you have dwelt on different points in detail. I have no doubt that the audience would have benefited immensely from this talk. And on behalf of FICCI Cascade and on behalf of everyone in the audience, I thank you and I pay my rich compliments to you, Mr. Johri. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure talking to you and your team. Thank you for having me over.
Thank you, sir. I would like to formally give a small thank you to all. Thank you, Mr. Cha, for facilitating the discussion today and enabling an interesting dialogue on various facets of illicit trade and its impact on the economy. A special thanks to our esteemed guest, Mr. Johri, for joining the In Conversation program and highlighting the effective concerted steps taken by CBIC, leading to rise in tax collection. Many congratulations to you and your team, sir, and thank you for your expert views. Cascade look forward to working with you and CBIC in our campaign against illicit trade. I would like to thank my chairman, Mr. Anil Rajput, for his insights, direction, and guiding vision in addressing the twin hazards of smuggling and counterfeiting. Thank you, Mr. Deepchand, for joining the session today, and thank you, audience, who have joined us on YouTube for taking out time and joining our fight in combating counterfeiting and smuggling. I look forward to your participation in our future endeavors as well. Have a great day ahead, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.